Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Tom Higbee, Professor of Special Education at Utah State University and Director of the ASSERT Autism Program. Broadcasting from my temporary home office today, I'm really happy to be able to talk with you about a project that my colleagues at ASSERT and I recently completed that we think will be of benefit to you as practitioners, parents, during this crazy time. Over the past few days, my team and I have developed a tutorial that will allow you to create a digital activity schedule using freely available software through the Google platform. And so today I wanted to kind of frame what this software can do, and then one of my colleagues, Cassidy Reinert, is going to walk you through this tutorial that we created and demonstrate how it can be used to improve independence, help your kids learn to better manage their time, and hopefully increase engagement and keep everybody engaged in positive, proactive learning activities during this time when services may be temporarily interrupted. So just a few basics about what this technology can do. A photographic activity schedule is a tool that my research lab has been using and exploring and developing for over 10 years now. We find it to be a fantastic tool to help, because its main goal is to promote independence, and that's really what we want for everybody, is to be able to work, play, interact more independently. And so photographic activity schedules are really well suited for that. They've been shown to decrease the need for adult prompts and allow individuals with autism and related disabilities to complete activities on their own, essentially using the visual cues provided in the schedule to prompt themselves instead of waiting for some adult to tell them what to do. So we think that makes them ideally suited for this current situation where there are fewer adults around to provide those directions. So I'm a huge fan of activity schedules. Cassidy's a huge fan, and hopefully we're going to kind of project some of that enthusiasm as we go through this tutorial today. So just a few basics about activity schedules if you're not familiar with them. And in the paper, which you'll have access to as a companion to this video, there are some references that you can look up that'll give you more details about activity schedules. And if you have any questions about how to run activity schedules, we'd love to chat with you. Just send us an email and we can set up a time to talk, or we can exchange information via email. Okay? So the first thing when setting up an activity schedule is going to be important is creating an environment that's conducive to learning. And how we'll typically do this when we work with the younger kids, we'll typically focus on play activities too. And at the beginning, these activities will be closed-ended activities, meaning that they have a clear beginning and a clear ending. So we'll typically select 2 or 3 activities that the child already knows how to do that are at least medium preference activities, but not that jackpot high preference activity that they're not going to want to stop doing, because the point of an activity schedule is to help them learn how to transition between different activities. So these activities we'll select will usually be pretty brief, closed-ended, meaning clear beginning, clear ending, things the student likes to do but aren't that jackpot high preference activity. So usually 2 or 3 of those, and then followed by what we call a terminal reinforcer, which is usually some kind of reward, oftentimes a preferred snack, just because that's easy to consume and you don't have to ask for it back. Cassidy will talk more about that in the tutorial portion of this video. And then also you're going to have added benefit. Cassidy is going to model some of how we do the teaching procedures using a volunteer that will be named later. The cool part about activity schedules, they can be used in multiple environments, and the research shows that these things they actually started out being used as a tool to help adults with leisure activities, self-care activities, employment activities, pretty much any task that's a multi-step task or any series of tasks you could put into an activity schedule. When we're teaching these play schedules that we'll often do with our younger kids, we'll typically do those in a specific area. Usually we'll have a designated desk or table, and then there might be a shelf where we put the materials, the toys and games, the puzzles, shape sorters, etc., on the shelf. But if you're at home, doing this at the kitchen table would be a great location because the table is large enough that you can put the materials on one end and still have an open workspace on the other. So that would be my suggestion. It could also be done on the floor. Just kind of, the idea is to set up the environment in a way that minimizes kind of transportation time going back and forth between the activities so that the focus can be on following the schedule. And then once the child learns how to follow the schedule effectively, you can then introduce greater distance and put things in different locations. But at the beginning, we like to kind of make things as easy as possible for the child. And so we'll have everything kind of in close proximity without a lot of distractions around. Now, when we say following a schedule, this is what we mean. And Cassidy will demonstrate this later in the video. Essentially, what we teach the child to do is open the schedule. So in this case, for our digital schedule, it would be opening the application on the tablet or whatever digital device you're going to be using. And this might be at the beginning a step that you do. You open up the application so that the schedule is there on the first page, which would be kind of a picture of what the first page of the schedule. Then they're going to then they're going to touch the picture of the first activity in the schedule. We teach that as we call it an observing response, kind of just to make sure they're paying attention to what the materials are cueing them to do. Then the next step is they're going to go get the materials necessary to complete that activity. They're going to complete the activity. When the activity is finished, they're going to put the materials back where it goes. They're going to turn the page on the digital activity schedule by tapping the advance arrow that's in the lower right-hand corner, bottom of the screen. And then they're going to keep completing that sequence of touch the picture, get the materials, complete the activity, put it back, turn the page until they get to the very last page, which is that terminal reinforcer, after which they're going to put the schedule back or hand it back to you, potentially, as the parent. How we get kids to follow these schedules is by teaching in a very specific way. The purpose of the activity schedule is to remove the adults from the equation. And so in order to do that, we have to provide our support, or what we call prompting, in a very specific way. We don't use any verbal instructions. The only verbal instruction we'll give will be at the beginning. Here's your schedule. Go do your schedule. Complete your activity schedule. And then that's the last thing we're going to say until the activity schedule is over. We're going to teach them to follow the schedule using physical prompts that are delivered from behind. And again, Cassidy will demonstrate this later on in the video. The reason why we do this is if we start giving verbal instructions, then the child is looking back to us when they get stuck and want to know what to do. And all of a sudden, we've just put ourselves right back in the schedule and defeated the whole purpose of the schedule. If we deliver physical prompts from behind the students, we're standing behind our learner and just gradually guiding them to complete the individual step using this process called graduated guidance, where we'll start with kind of hand-over-hand prompts. And then as they don't need that much support, we can move to the wrist, to the elbow, to the shoulder, etc., and gradually reduce those prompts. But by prompting them from behind physically like that, they're still seeing all the visual cues that should be controlling their behavior. And what's really interesting is those physical prompts are actually much easier to fade, we call it, or gradually reduce than are those verbal prompts. And so it's easier kind of us to fade into the background and let the child become more and more independent using those physical prompts. So that's absolutely critical as you're teaching your learner how to follow the schedule, that you're not giving verbal instructions, you're not making eye contact even, you're not using gestures, but only physical prompts. That's the strategy we're going to use to teach them to follow the schedule. When a student makes a mistake, and the idea is to try and prevent mistakes. And so we might even provide more support at the beginning than we think is necessary for the child to follow the schedule so that they don't make mistakes. But if they do happen to make a mistake, the type of mistake will determine what kind of error correction we use. Now, if they're just in the process of completing the activity and they start to self-stimulate with the puzzle pieces or do the activity wrong, just step in and block that and guide them to do it correctly. But if they, for example, touch a picture and then go get the wrong materials, what you're going to do is you're going to bring them all the way back to the schedule, have them touch the picture again, and you're going to guide them to get the correct picture, get the correct materials, so that we make sure we link that picture with those materials and don't end up building this chain of errors. Okay. So prompting and prompt fading is absolutely critical. And Cassidy is also going to show you in the tutorial that we started, like I said, with these basic components, closed-ended activities, but we want to then go on to adding more complex components like teaching the students how to make choices And so how that will happen is we'll have a page that has 2 or more options that they can select from instead of just the static single picture that's been on the pages. And we'll teach the kids to to make the selection of that choice and then go and do get those materials and complete the activity. We also have ways that we can teach the kids how to, where we can teach the kids how to use the schedule to complete open-ended activities that don't have a clear beginning and ending. Things like playing with figurines or trains or basketball or whatever. Essentially, we teach the kids how to use timers, and there are steps in the tutorial that will teach you how to create timer pages. And essentially, we teach the kids to set their own timers. And so what they'll do, we'll use visual cues to indicate the number of minutes and a start and stop, typically red circles for the minutes and green circle for the start and stop button. And then we'll teach the kids, using hand-over-hand prompting again, to touch each of the, so for example, a 3-minute timer would have 3 red circles followed by a green circle. And we'll teach the kids to touch the green dots underneath the picture and then the green button on the timer, which sets it a minute. Sorry, the red to red, minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, the green button, which is start and stop, and then when they can go do the activity for that amount of time. And when the timer goes off, we would physically prompt them to turn the timer off by touching again the start stop button. Okay, so we can add open-ended activities. Super cool once the kids get the basics of following activity schedules. It's really important that we kind of track progress on the activity schedules to know that the student is making progress, and there are some examples in the document that will be provided that contains some examples of data collection and how you might do that. And that's something that you can also get some guidance from your behavior analyst provider. Okay, so with that introduction, I will yield the digital floor to Cassidy, and she will take you through the steps of making a digital activity schedule and then demonstrate how you would do the teaching procedures that I've been kind of outlining. So thanks for your time and for paying attention, and we hope this tool will be useful for you as we work together to improve independence.
Hi, I'm Cassidy Reiner, the Clinical Director of the CERT Autism Program. As Tom said, we have created a paper and a task analysis describing how to create a digital activity schedule using Google Slides. The paper is being published in the emergency issue of Behavior Analysis and Practice. We have included a link in to the paper in the comment section below. In the paper, you can find step-by-step instructions on how to create a digital activity schedule template. I'm going to walk you through that template, as well as a few activity schedules that I created using the template. I will also show you how to navigate within the schedules and model some prompting strategies that we use to teach activity schedules. First, I'm going to show you what a digital activity schedule looks like. The first page in the schedule is the cover page, and then the next page is a close-ended activity. These activities have a clear beginning and end. At the bottom of many of the pages, you'll see these navigation arrows, and I'm going to walk you through how to create those as well. It's important that none of the slides transition when we are clicking anywhere other than the picture. Like Tom said, when we teach kids to do activity schedules, we prompt them to first touch the picture, then retrieve the items. So when we click anywhere other than the next button, we shouldn't see a transition for these simple pages. This is a little bit more complex page. This is a choice page, and you can see that there's 4 different items that the kid can choose from, and when they make a selection by pointing or touching on it, a activity will appear down here. They would then touch the activity and complete that one. This page also transitions with the next button. These pages transition a little bit differently. So we also discussed a little bit earlier how to set a timer in activity schedule. We just use these red and green dots, and they correspond with these buttons on the timer. So for a kiddo who's setting a 3-minute timer, the sequence would look like this. They would first touch the red dot, then the timer, then the dot again, timer, and so on until they started the timer. So for these digital activity schedules, we just have a YouTube video in place that runs for 3 minutes. When it's done, you will then push the next button when the timer's up. On this last page, there's a terminal reinforcer or a snack. Then they would return the treat bin to the shelf before they transition to the next page. And then this last page would signal that they are completely done with the schedule. Okay, now I'm going to show you a little bit about the navigation tools within the schedules. So these little arrows down at the bottom, when you click on them, to create this arrow, you would just draw in an arrow using the shape tool, and then we can create links to other pages within the schedule. So if you right click and come to this link, it will say that you can link it to somewhere else in this presentation by clicking on this. And then for all of the ones that are arrows, most of the time they're just going to go to the next slide. So you can press next slide. And then when we hover over this drawn in arrow, it will say next slide. And then for the rest of the page, we don't want it to transition anywhere. So we're going to actually draw a giant rectangle over everything and then link it like we did before with the right click to the same page that it is. So you can see this one says student's name page, and that means that when they click anywhere other than this arrow, it'll transition only to that page, so they won't actually transition to anywhere different. The navigation is a little bit more complex for more advanced activity schedules, like a choice page. This one, you'll create 4 different pages, and they will all have similar navigation. So they should all have a next navigation tool, and the way that you can create this is after you've created one, you can then go back to your other slides that have the 5 pictures on it and copy and paste it, and they should all transition to that same location, which would be the next page after all of the choice pages. Like I said, we have step-by-step instructions in the paper, and that is much more concise than looking at it in a video. So on these pages, each one of these pictures will then link to a page. So I'll show you how to do this one. So this picture should be linked to this page over here. So for this picture, I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go to link either in the right click, or I can just go insert link up here on the toolbar. And then I'm going to transition it not to next slide. I'm going to say transition to slide 4 and then go apply. So now in my presentation, if I'm on that page, I can click on that and it would take me straight to that activity as a big picture. Navigation for the timer isn't much more complex. For the first 3 pages where they're pushing the red dot, you would create a similar slide that every time they touch the dot on the timer, it would transition to the next slide. The other thing that you add in for each slide is you add in a different timestamp. So that one is 1 minute, the next one would be 2, and then following 2 would actually be 3. So this one says 3 and this one's hidden behind the other timer. So the last one that you would click would actually be this green start button, which would transition you to that page. So this button actually is just a screenshot of that same location and just put in like a picture on top of that, that page. So that is a template of how to create an activity schedule. I'm going to show you a couple other schedules that are more and less complex. So this is the most simple form of activity schedule, is just 3 close-ended activities. So you can see this presentation would just start with these little ring stackers. Then you would come to a matching activity, a lacing card, they would then get their treat, and that's their entire schedule. When we're starting with activity schedules, we definitely start with these close-ended activities. Then the next step would be adding in a choice activity. This is a mixture of choice and simple close-ended activities. So then they would make a choice. They wanted to do that puzzle. And then they would move throughout the rest of the slides. So this is really similar to the other, as all the activities are close-ended activities. And then this would be the most or more complex schedule. It has close-ended, choice, and timed activities. As you can see, all of these schedules have the activities in the same order. We wouldn't typically do that. They would be rearranged and reordered as often as possible, so that we're not just teaching rote memorization of steps in a task. We would teach them to follow the schedule. When the schedule is ready for your client or your child to use, you can set it up on a tablet or a phone. Some phones and tablets, you'll need to download the Google Slides app to them before they work, but then you would just come to this present button at the top, and then that would be how they would view it on the different devices. Also, if they can use a mouse, they could do it on a computer as well. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you guys is some prompting strategies within Activity Schedule. In the first video, you'll see me prompt my son to touch the picture and to retrieve the correct items. Time for activity schedule. In the second video, you'll see me prompt my son to select a choice activity and to set the timer in the schedule. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or you want more information, please check out the comment section below. You can find our website, and you can also find the link to the paper there. Thanks.